Some breaking news right now. Disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein has taken his own life while he was behind bars here in New York City. Epstein was facing trafficking charges.
The FBI keeps telling the public there is no credible evidence to prosecute any other powerful men connected to Jeffrey Epstein. But at the same time, that same agency has been holding back more than 2 million pages of files it refuses to release. And now, survivors who already sat across from federal agents and gave them specific names are preparing to testify under oath before Congress. The Department of Justice says the case is closed. The files seem to suggest there is more to explain. And the gap between those two things keeps getting harder to ignore. So, at some point, people are going to ask, if there is really nothing there, why is so much still being kept out of sight?
And that's fair. And when it came to Maxwell, it was about the idea, right? They would bring these girls in, and then they would have them recruit other girls, and that was kind of the network that was being built up. From a prosecutorial point of view, from a legal point of view, somebody's looking at this and saying, wait a minute, I'm looking at these filings, and they're identifying certain people, or they're redacting certain other people, and they say, there's not enough evidence to charge this person, or limited evidence regarding involvement. What does that mean? So for a layperson, what is that?
Start with what is actually on the record. The DOJ has admitted it is still withholding roughly 2.5 million pages of Epstein-related records. Their explanation is that the material is duplicative or non-responsive. But that does not really answer much. It sounds more like a bureaucratic way of waving people off. Meanwhile, released FBI interview summaries show multiple victims naming specific men, including Henry Uretsky, Harvey Weinstein, George Mitchell, Jess Staley, and Leon Black. These are not random names hidden in some obscure footnote. They are names the FBI wrote down, filed away, and from what the public can see, did not act on in any clear way. And when Congress passed the Epstein Files Transparency Act, demanding full disclosure, the DOJ responded with heavily redacted material while also acknowledging there was still a massive amount of documentation it was not releasing. That would already raise serious questions. Then the details become even harder to explain. Pause on that for a second. The FBI says there was no credible evidence to charge anyone else. But the same agency labeled a file involving an accuser of Donald Trump as a protected source. It never forwarded the case to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Those records only came out after public pressure made it much harder to keep holding them back. So the agency is saying there is nothing to find, while certain files are being handled with the kind of caution you would expect around state secrets. That does not look like a full public accounting. It looks more like control. And the people who understand that better than anyone are the survivors. They sat with federal agents. They gave details. They named names. And now, years later, they are watching the same agency that collected their testimony tell the public there is nothing more to see. Then you add the politics, because at this point, it is impossible to separate them. Donald Trump campaigned on releasing the Epstein files. He promised transparency. He turned it into a rallying cry for supporters who believed the establishment had buried the truth. Then his DOJ released only a fraction of what it had, declared the job finished, and fired Pam Bondi after bipartisan criticism over how the process was handled. Bondi had failed to comply with a subpoena to testify. Then she was out, and the 2.5 million withheld pages stayed exactly where they were. So the man who ran on opening the files is now leading an administration that still refuses to open them. That goes beyond a campaign promise that fell apart. It was useful when it brought in votes, and suddenly a lot less useful when it was time to follow through.
The time that she spent with Ghislaine Maxwell, and she said she's like the most pure, evil woman. She had no remorse for the victims when, stuff about Jeffrey Epstein would come up on like the news in prison, that she's just a very cold, evil person.
Is she going back on this housewife show?
No. And Andy's adamant that...
The story gets a lot more uncomfortable when you look at what happens next. Survivors are preparing to testify under oath before the House Oversight Committee. Publicly. On the record. Not in a sealed deposition. Not behind closed doors where the public never hears what was said. Sworn testimony carries weight. It cannot be brushed aside as easily, and it cannot be buried in a box labeled duplicative. One of those survivors is Anuska DeGiorgio. She has described walking into Epstein's Palm Beach house as a teenager and finding a schoolgirl uniform laid out on her bed, with Ghislaine Maxwell standing there asking, "What is the matter? Don't you like to play dressing up?" That image is horrifying by itself. But what matters now is that she is willing to say it under oath. While the FBI does not have anyone in that same room facing the same legal risk for the decisions it made, victims can be punished for lying. The agency that set their testimony aside does not face the same kind of pressure. And the survivors know that. When Melania Trump gave an unscheduled White House press conference denying any meaningful connection to Epstein and calling for congressional hearings, 15 survivors released a joint statement pushing back hard. They said she was shifting the burden onto victims while the Trump administration still had not fully complied with the Transparency Act. They pointed out that survivors have already come forward. They have already filed reports. They have already given testimony. Asking them to do even more now, in their view, shifts the responsibility away from the people who are supposed to act. That is not polite frustration. It sounds like people who went through the system, watched it fail, and are done pretending the failure belongs to them. The First Lady wanted credit for calling for hearings. The survivors wanted to know why they had to keep proving themselves when the people in power still had not done their jobs. Now bring Ghislaine Maxwell into this, because she is not sitting quietly in prison while everyone else moves on. She filed a habeas petition claiming there were 25 men who made secret settlements with victims and could be considered co-conspirators. 25. Whether named or unnamed, that number changes the scale of what people think they understand about this case. She also submitted an amended motion on a USB drive in April, which means her legal fight is still active, still developing, and still unpredictable. Jen Shah, who served time in the same federal lockup, told reporters that Maxwell received private workouts, special meals, bottled water, and showed no remorse for anyone Epstein hurt. Shah also described watching Maxwell dismiss victims testifying before Congress as if their pain meant nothing. Then, within a week of Maxwell interviewing Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, she was transferred to a low-security prison camp in Texas. The timing of that move has fed more speculation than almost any document release could have.
Is and never was part of the Epstein files. She was sentenced in 2025. This was an interview by Trump's lawyer to protect Trump from the fallout about the Epstein files. What this really is nothing but a sketchy PR stunt by the Department of Justice. And we have seen this movie before. The Maxwell interview is to the Epstein files what the Barr letter was to the Mueller investigation.
So where does that leave us? The same Justice Department that says no further charges are coming moved a convicted trafficker to a more comfortable facility shortly after she sat down with a senior Trump official. And the public is expected to accept that there is no connection. The same FBI that says victim testimony was not credible flagged a file involving a Trump accuser as a protected source and never sent it to prosecutors. And people are supposed to believe that was simply routine. The same administration that promised to drain the swamp is keeping a 2.5 million page pile of Epstein documents buried while survivors prepare to testify about what they say they already told federal agents years ago. It is very hard to make all of that fit together cleanly. The next part is especially disturbing. House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer confirmed Republicans are split over whether Maxwell should receive a pardon in exchange for testimony. Comer himself said he thinks it looks bad, and that other than Epstein, Maxwell is the worst person in the entire investigation. But he also said many people on his committee believe a pardon is a reasonable deal. Take that in for a second. The party that ran on Law and Order is openly debating whether to let Epstein's one convicted associate go free if she agrees to talk. At the same time, survivors who have been talking for years are still waiting for someone to act on what they already said. You also have to look at New Mexico, because that may be where the story starts to open up in a new way. The state launched a truth commission with subpoena power and a $2 million budget to investigate Epstein's Zorro Ranch. Bill Gates is scheduled to testify before the Oversight Committee on June 10th. Maxwell's habeas petition is still pending. The 2.5 million pages remain unreleased. And every time someone gets close to forcing more of those records into the open, the DOJ finds another way to say the file is complete. The problem is, by its own admission, it is not.
We can't move those bills. So these people could have gotten paid this entire time because people view, well, if we pay them, then maybe the shutdown will go on longer. So let's not pay them and use them as a pawn. So there is gamesmanship going on all sides at the expense of the government worker and at the expense of the American people, right? Trying to get home, sitting in line for 3 or 4 hours. Look, the American people know that government is...
The FBI says there is no credible evidence. But the FBI also labeled victim interviews as protected sources, withheld files until public pressure forced them out, and never forwarded a Trump accusers case to prosecutors. The DOJ says the file release is complete, but the DOJ also admits it is still holding 2.5 million pages. The administration promised transparency, but that same administration fired the Attorney General who failed to deliver it, and still has not clearly explained why survivor testimony naming powerful men was not enough to prompt further action. And one of the ugliest parts may be what the public was distracted by while all of this was happening. While survivors were preparing to testify under oath, and while the FBI was sitting on millions of pages it still would not release, the internet spent weeks chasing a false conspiracy theory claiming Ellen DeGeneres had been named as a cannibal in the Epstein files. The claim was debunked. Snopes and other fact-checkers confirmed that her name and the word cannibal appear separately in the files, not together. But the rumor spread anyway. It pulled in millions of views. And meanwhile, real survivors with real testimony about real powerful men still could not get the FBI to explain why their words were not enough. You do not have to believe every conspiracy theory surrounding this case to see that something is deeply wrong. All you have to do is compare what the government says with what the government does. Look at the distance between the public statements and the actual behavior. Then ask why the people closest to the case are being asked to prove themselves again and again, while the institutions that failed them face little to no consequence.
And about a major aspect of the case in general that has been or a theory about, Epstein's death in prison that has been heavily popularized within Trump's base, which is, Epstein didn't kill himself kind of stuff. And then they, of course, attached themselves to that and walked it back.
The FBI says there is no credible evidence. But the FBI also labeled victim interviews as protected sources, withheld files until public pressure forced them out, and never forwarded a Trump accusers case to prosecutors. The DOJ says the file release is complete, but the DOJ also admits it is still holding 2.5 million pages. The administration promised transparency, but that same administration fired the Attorney General who failed to deliver it, and still has not clearly explained why survivor testimony naming powerful men was not enough to prompt further action. And one of the ugliest parts may be what the public was distracted by while all of this was happening. While survivors were preparing to testify under oath, and while the FBI was sitting on millions of pages it still would not release, the internet spent weeks chasing a false conspiracy theory claiming Ellen DeGeneres had been named as a cannibal in the Epstein files. The claim was debunked. Snopes and other fact-checkers confirmed that her name and the word cannibal appear separately in the files, not together. But the rumor spread anyway. It pulled in millions of views. And meanwhile, real survivors with real testimony about real powerful men still could not get the FBI to explain why their words were not enough. You do not have to believe every conspiracy theory surrounding this case to see that something is deeply wrong. All you have to do is compare what the government says with what the government does. Look at the distance between the public statements and the actual behavior. Then ask why the people closest to the case are being asked to prove themselves again and again, while the institutions that failed them face little to no consequence.
I'm sorry that the Bureau of Prisons gets to decide. The Bureau of Prisons is run independently from the FBI, from the U.S. Attorney's Office, from the judiciary, and who knows where the person's going to go. That's just how it happens. Right. So for Ghislaine Maxwell to have been transferred to actually a prison that has very, very minimal security and is just not fit for someone who's been convicted of horrible crimes against children.
And the legal filings make the whole situation even stranger. Maxwell is not sitting there quietly enjoying whatever privileges she may have. She is still fighting her conviction from inside that camp. In December, she filed a habeas petition claiming there were 25 men who made secret settlements with victims and could be considered co-conspirators. 25. That number did not come from anonymous internet speculation. It came from Maxwell herself in a court filing under penalty of perjury. Then in April, she submitted an amended motion on a USB drive. Prosecutors confirmed they received it. The judge had already allowed her to amend the petition after the Epstein files were released, which means she is now using documents the government tried to keep hidden to argue that other people should have been charged alongside her. That puts the Justice Department in a pretty absurd position. They spent months fighting to keep files buried. Maxwell got access through the court process. And now she is using those same files to say, look at these 25 men. Look at these settlements. Why am I the only one sitting here? That does not sound like someone who has accepted her fate. It sounds like someone who believes she has leverage and is willing to use it. And she is making that argument while the administration that prosecuted her is publicly split on whether to let her out. House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer confirmed Republicans are divided on a pardon. He personally opposes it. He called Maxwell the worst person in the whole investigation other than Epstein. But he also told Politico that a lot of people on his committee think a pardon could be a reasonable deal in exchange for her testimony. A lot of people. Not one or two fringe members. So, let's lay out what is happening right now. Maxwell gets moved to a nicer facility within a week of talking to Blanche. Her legal team is pushing a habeas petition that points to 25 supposedly untouchable men. Republican lawmakers are openly talking about whether to pardon her. And her own attorney told Politico there is a good chance she gets out. That does not feel like a closed case. It feels like a case still being worked over in real time, while the public is told there is nothing left to see. The same people who promise transparency are making quiet moves that appear to benefit Epstein's one convicted associate. And no one in power seems eager to explain why.
And we can tell you the top line here is that there's no client list, according to Ghislaine Maxwell, and there are no high-powered individuals that were on any sort of list. She did not incriminate anybody in that 9-hour interview that she did with the Deputy Attorney General.
But the story does not stop with Maxwell's prison conditions or her court filings, because something much larger is happening in New Mexico, and it could move around the federal system entirely. The state legislature created a truth commission with subpoena power and a $2 million budget to investigate Epstein's Zorro Ranch. This is not another federal operation. It is a state-level investigation outside the same framework that has blocked accountability for years. The commission has already held its first hearings. They are hiring investigators. They have the authority to compel testimony from anyone they want. And unlike the federal government, they have real targets. An interim report is due by July 31st. A final report is due by December 31st. Those targets matter because the federal government does not seem to be working under any real clock. The DOJ can keep saying the file is complete. The FBI can keep saying there is no credible evidence. But New Mexico has dates on the calendar, and people are watching them. The commission is specifically looking into why the state investigation ended in 2019 without a resolution. They want to know whether it was a failure, a cover-up, or a broader breakdown in the system. And they have the power to refer evidence for criminal prosecution. So even if the feds refuse to act, New Mexico might not. The same state where Epstein owned 10,000 acres of land for 26 years is finally asking questions that should have been asked a long time ago. At the same time, the House Oversight Committee is moving forward on its own schedule. Bill Gates is scheduled to testify on June 10th. He flew on Epstein's plane. He spent time with Epstein in the United States and abroad. He insists he did nothing wrong, but now he has to say that under oath. The committee has already deposed Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton. They have interviewed multiple figures connected to Epstein's network, and survivors are preparing to give public sworn testimony that cannot be buried in a redacted file or brushed aside as unhelpful. The imbalance is almost impossible to miss. Victims face penalties for lying. The FBI does not face the same pressure. And the people who ran the investigation have not faced consequences for whatever they did or did not do with the information survivors gave them years ago.
We're underage. How do you just have this be so one-sided? It is, I mean, it's such a miscarriage of justice. This is not what justice is supposed to look like. It's just, it's incredibly disappointing.
Amanda.
Now let me bring in something that cuts through all the legal maneuvering and political noise. Anuska DeGiorgio, the survivor I mentioned earlier, did not only describe the schoolgirl uniform on her bed. She also talked about the moment everything shifted for her. She had a daughter in 2013. And when she looked at that baby girl, she suddenly saw herself. She saw the innocence. She saw how precious and fragile that child was. And she realized how hard she would fight to make sure that never happened to her daughter. Something like a switch flipped. She said that was not a legal filing. It was not a courtroom argument. It was a human being describing the moment she stopped being afraid and started fighting back. And she is not the only one who says becoming a parent changed the way she saw all of this. DeGiorgio said many of the survivors she knows who have daughters described the same feeling. They suddenly saw who they had been. They saw what had been taken from them. And they got angry in a way they had never felt before. That is the kind of detail that pulls this case back to what actually matters. Not the conspiracy theories about set designs or pizza parties. Not the influencers jet skiing to Epstein's island for views. Real people had their lives stolen, and the system that was supposed to protect them has spent years doing almost everything except acting clearly on what it knew. So let me ask you something. If the federal government is finished investigating, why is New Mexico spending millions to run its own investigation from the ground up? If the FBI found no credible evidence, why did agents interview one accuser 4 times and then stop without forwarding her case to prosecutors? If Maxwell is just another convict serving her sentence, why was she transferred to a low-security camp within a week of interviewing a senior Trump official? And if the file release is complete, why are 2.5 million pages still sitting somewhere inside the DOJ, labeled duplicative or non-responsive?
I know, but we have a congressional act now to requiring the release, but they're going to say, you know
subject
what?
To
Tom
redaction.
Hanks, it's unfair that he was mentioned
the
because
law
he was eating
says
Skittles.
subject to redaction. Subject to redaction.
And we all know what that means. That's to protect.
That's why I'm saying you will never be satisfied with what's released.
This is where things stand. Maxwell is pointing to 25 men in court filings. New Mexico is spending millions to investigate what the feds did not resolve. Survivors are preparing to testify under oath, while the agency that dismissed them stays quiet. Republican lawmakers are openly discussing a pardon for Epstein's one convicted associate. And the same people who promised transparency are still holding on to millions of pages they refuse to show anyone. If the government has nothing to hide, releasing every page should not be difficult. If there is something in those files they do not want the public to see, this is exactly how you would expect them to act. Right now, they appear to be betting that no one will force the issue. Do you really think Maxwell stays in prison if Republicans are already talking about a pardon and her own attorney says there is a good chance she gets out? And what do you think New Mexico finds now that someone is finally looking at Zorro Ranch without the federal government controlling the entire process? Drop a comment and tell me where you think this goes from here. Because right now, pressure is coming from more than one direction.